Recording now. There you go.
Thanks.
All right, well, I'll step up then and play Scott's role as chairing this committee meeting. First agenda item is to approve the minutes of the last meeting from October 14. Any comments on the minutes? Corrections, changes? Would anybody like to suggest that they should be approved?
Sure, I wasn't there, so.
I'll motion to approve.
All right.
I wasn't there either, but I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, good. Second item is an update on the survey. So I have some good news on that. I have recruited one of the staff people here at Mount Desert 365, and she has added in all of the village information so that everyone is assigned a village. And we did include, besides the usual 6, we have included the villages of Sound, where you live, Pete, and of Beach Hill, so that we have a clearer sense of where people are. So we have gone through and done all of that. We have, we may need to fine tune a little bit around the source of the information. Anything that came in by paper has now been added to Vetro. So those things are all done. We had a little bit of difficulty with that. It wasn't accepting all addresses, even though we know that the addresses exist. And so we have played around with that and gotten to the closest street we could that Vetro would accept that. So I think we have all the paper except one now in Vetro. And our person has also added everything that came in on the Google forms is also now in Vetro. So Vetro is complete, and we have the combined list with everybody in place.
Nice.
Speaking of technical difficulties, I'm having some trouble with my mail. She has sent me that document, and I'm going to put it in our Dropbox folder, and I'll give it a new name. But we can work with that. And one of the people from the Economic Development Committee who does this kind of work, statistical analysis, et cetera, all the time. She works with the Margaret Chase Smith Center. She is going to help us fine tune some of that data a little bit more. So that is still to come, and we've just kind of wrapped that up. So. But I think that everything on the Vetro platform is good now.
Great.
Kathy, the 2 paper ones you gave me, I didn't put them in because sounds like the file that you've been working on with your staff is now different than the one I have. And so we need to kind of wait. And I wanted to wait until everything was a bit stable and you can send me the most up to date.
Okay. All right. So once I add that document into our shared folder, I'll let you know that it's there and what it's called. Okay.
Yeah, there's just 2. The 2 that you gave me, I think there's just 2. Yep.
All right. All right. And okay. So we've done that, and I will just make sure that we have it clear, the original source. It's either directly to Vetro, Google now put in Vetro, or paper now put in Vetro. So everything's in Vetro. So, okay. The community engagement events. we thought it would be good to start with a review of what we thought from our meeting with Spectrum.
It was pretty informative, I thought. I mean, there were a lot of stuff they're doing that I hadn't even heard of myself, and I'm involved with them on a regular basis. So that was encouraging to hear. I'm not sure what everybody else felt, but it seemed like they have some stuff in the works that might be helpful.
Yeah, for those of us like me who didn't attend, what was the gist of the discussion? What are their plans?
Well, I think from what I recall, it's been a couple of weeks and a lot's happened in my life since then. But they're definitely moving forward with more fiber, and they do offer fiber installs on a requested basis, mostly business related, and they do offer service up to almost a gig through their combination fiber coax service now on most of Mount Desert, maybe not all, but so they are increasing their offerings and their speeds, which is encouraging. I guess the only thing we'd like them to come down on a little bit is their price, but that's always another issue. I think you can get a gig service for a little bit under $100 now.
Wow.
Really?
How about coverage, the footprint? Did they talk about, are there pockets that they're not covering in Mount Desert?
Well, there are a few. Most of the ones I know about tend to be long private driveways or roads that didn't meet the number of requirements that they needed. There's probably the possibility we could do some kind of another plan in, if we want, with them to cover some of those outlying areas. I know a lot of people have stepped up, a lot of summer people, at least that I've worked with, have stepped up and paid to have services put in. That can be quite expensive, so that's probably not something somebody would do that didn't have enough resources, but it is an option. I know a couple projects I've got going now with people. There's one in particular I know of. It's about it's in Bar Harbor, but it's about a mile of cable down a private road, and I think it's going to cost them about $8,000. But in reality, that's not terribly expensive when you think about a mile of cable. So there are areas like that I'm not sure if Spectrum would ever be able to cover 100% without some additional resources, just because of their business model, I guess. But
so at a, say, a town meeting, would we say that the current provider is covering 95% of the residents, 97? I'm trying to get a sense of, are the ones that are remaining, are those that are just so remote they don't really care, or how would we characterize that?
Right. I think I haven't had a chance to look at all the data that's come in recently, but I'd say you could probably say, 85 to 90%, or the cable at least comes close. Whether people have subscribed to it or not is another issue, I guess. I'm not sure. Yeah, about that.
I'm hoping that that the Vetro Fiber Map platform will let us look at that.
Right. Yeah, they have all the roads and all the utility poles, and they should have on there too what Spectrum has, whether it's to the minute up to date or not, but it should be pretty up to date. I know Spectrum has. I've got some of the older maps that they had when they did the Pretty Marsh expansion still from that project, and I think Derlin has some of those as well if we need to ever review some of that data. But there were sections, there's like the road up by Astaku that goes up the hill there, I know doesn't have cable currently. There's a few other roads that are town roads like that have a number of houses on them that Spectrum hasn't covered yet, that certainly could be talked about with them at some point for expansion, probably, if that's the direction we decide to go.
I'll try and get a good map of what Vetro would show us if we look at the whole thing.
Yep.
And
I know we had a couple of those when they were doing the Pretty Marsh one, but so they're not probably up to date, but is there another one, another session coming out with Spectrum? No, it's consolidated, right? The next one, yeah,
The next one would be with Consolidated.
right.
And I wanted to see Intro Cares, team manager. What I'll do is I'll try and locate the map of what we have for services that we can demonstrate on the island,
Right,
or in the town rather.
yep,
Um,
that would be good to have.
and yeah.
Yeah, and Kathy, do you have, with those maps, are those maps able to be enlarged enough to actually see finer detail? Because I recall from the back from the, way the last round, when we did look at maps, the maps that Spectrum or Charter back in the day showed us, they kind of put up on the screen, and it was so small that we were like, well, here's the area that we have. And we were like,
Right.
internally, I was like, let's get a screenshot of that, type of thing. So
Ideally, this stuff should be showing up on the Vetro maps now, has a GIS layer that they can kind of layer on top.
Mhm.
I haven't had a chance to look at those yet, but I'm not sure do we have access to those yet, Kathy, or?
Well, we should have, so now that we have put in all of the survey data, we should be able to come up with a map of where those services are. And I know that we can see individual services if you look at whatever contact we had for the person who did the survey.
Right,
What I'd like to see is the pattern. Who
Right.
has what where?
right,
And I think that that's what we need to get to for this group. And I think that that might help determine where there might be service gaps. And it's not, we had 200 and something of them, but so it's not everybody in the town, but it's a lot of people. And I'm hoping that the map would demonstrate.
yeah, I know last time when we were doing the Pretty Marsh thing, a couple of us would, we drove all around and actually looked at the poles and marked up some maps at that point of where Spectrum was, because you can kind of tell from looking up the pole what's there.
Right.
So that could be something we do again if we like to.
Yes. Yeah. So one of the things I didn't realize how much money, when we were talking about the event we had with Spectrum, how much money they say they invested themselves in that Pretty Marsh project.
Yeah, it was almost $1 million total, wasn't it? Between
Well, they said they put in $600,000.
right, and we put in,
300.
and then was it some of that we got back? I think we got some of that back, right, Derlin, like 100 something.
Yeah, I don't have the figures right in front of me, but it was
Yeah.
it was like 2 to 1. They roughly 2 to 1 what they invested compared to what we did.
Yeah, and then we got some back through that grant through Maine, I thought. Some of
Well,
that.
yeah, we had I
Yeah.
don't know, 60, 70,000, something like that back through Connect Me. I
Right.
forget, the numbers
Yeah.
escape, but yeah, we got a substantial portion back
Yeah.
from that.
Yeah, so that was good.
I think that when we raised the question of either drop services, interference, slow speed, et cetera, she always wanted to know, well, where is it? Tell us what address that is, and maybe we can do something about that.
Yeah, sometimes, when I'm called in to look at things or places, a lot of times it's either the cable plant needs a refresh, like a new line run from the pole, or the modem is, 15 years old, or their wireless equipment is challenged. So a lot of times you have to look at a case by case basis. I think that's what she was saying, that a lot of times, people don't know that they need a new modem every couple of years or stuff like that. So.
When you came away with the idea that they are doing more fiber than coax cable, I mean.
Yeah, they do. They do have quite a bit. I mean, most all the poles, when you look through town, where you see the kind of It's usually this, second one up from the telephone, then you have your cable, then you have your power at the top. Anywhere you see those drops, where you see that kind of a drop bend by each pole, that's fiber. And then they have a coax adapter that they clamp on, kind of cut onto those points where they have people that are service, and then from the main line, it's coax, just because it's they can deliver television and stuff easier through coax than they can through fiber currently with the equipment that they have, cable boxes and things. But
So they all the carriers would have fiber for some amount, and then something past that.
Right.
Consolidated has twisted pair copper, which doesn't do much.
No.
Spectrum has coax, which can do a lot. And
Right.
what I'm hearing is that they are not only do they have enough fiber close enough they can get up to a gigabit service now kind of routinely, but they also have fiber to the prem in some cases, if I heard you right. Okay.
Correct. There's quite a few summer houses now that have fiber to the premise, and you can get up to 10 gig service if you're willing to pay for it. It's $600 or $700 a month, but it is available. They have that as an option. We were exploring other options at the high school as a backup from main school and library network, and they already have the fiber actually run into the high school, so they offered, oh, we can do that this afternoon for you. Yeah, I don't have $800 a month. But it is an option. Yeah.
So in terms of speed, I mean, I'm in San Antonio, Texas, and I have 20 megabits. I'm in a desert donut of a munchkin of.
Now you should
wasteland.
look at Starlink, dear. I just set up 3 or 4 of those in the past couple of weeks, and they get 250 to 300 megs down and 50 to 80 up.
Is that a satellite based?
Yes, that's Elon Musk and his crew.
Oh yeah, clouding up the sky with debris of satellites. So in terms of the spectrum story, speeds are available to people who want them. The speed doesn't seem a barrier, and they seem to be pushing the speeds up to be something. I mean, only a few years ago, before the Pretty Marsh project here in Woods Road, we had 3 megabits when it wasn't raining.
Right.
That kind of thing. Less of it did rain. It was poor. Couldn't even call it broadband. Now we're up to 100 megabits here with Spectrum, and
100 is the basic plan.
Yeah,
you can get 400 for like $20 more a month, and then you can get a gigabit for like $80 a month.
So the speeds are going up geometrically. It seems like I have no need for a gigabit, let alone 10, but some might. So in terms of the economic for the town benefits, seems like that's not a barrier now in terms of speeds where it's available.
Right.
The availability question was, what's the footprint, and are there places? And I'm hearing you say that it seems like there aren't many places that don't have the ability to get it if they want to. I mean, it's fair if somebody in Northern Neck says, hey, I got a place here, but I don't really care about adding a service. But if I want to, I can add it. It's available, I'd say, even if they don't have it today. But if it's a mile road.
Places, there's a few roads here and there, a few outlying areas that, but a lot of those areas have been covered in the last year and a half, but through community efforts where the people have, gotten together. Like there's a road down on Long Pond, Lely, I forget what that road is. That's kind of over from Beach Hill Road, that kind of goes way down the steep hill and kind of covers those houses.
Ripples.
Yeah,
Ripples.
and they all got together, a lot of those people, and Spectrum extended that line, and they kind of divvied it up based on the number of houses that they cover. So a lot of those outlying areas have been done through just a community effort where everybody says, do you want it? Do you want it? Do you want it? Okay, we'll take that $12,000 and divide it up by 15 houses. And
so from a different angle, Brian, do you know of any from the school perspective? Are there families that don't have access to broadband in Mount Desert?
Well, we have a couple. Mostly what we're doing for them now through the Rural Broadband Initiative, we're providing hotspots that we get through FCC grants right now, that we can provide those for people at home when they're either quarantining, can't come to school, or don't have a decent service plan or can't afford it on their own.
Yeah, right. Just trying to triangulate then on where the gaps might be. That might be a check against the maps to say the
Right,
people you know
right.
about. I don't need to know exactly who the families are.
Yep.
And if it's affordability, that's a different issue. But if it's
Right.
they chose not to do it, then
Right.
that'd be something to know about. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
Spectrum, we have been able to hook up a number of families with income restrictions, and Spectrum does have a plan for $19 a month that gives you 50 by 5, which is a basic kind of account. So that's a pretty affordable. It's a little less actually than a basic consolidated plan for a lot more speed. So that's a good option as well.
Yes, she said, I was just looking over my notes from that meeting, that the Spectrum internet asset was $17.99 a month with a modem. Yep. And 30, what she had said in the meeting was just 30. And in order to qualify, families qualify via the school lunch program. If you're income eligible for school lunch program, you're eligible for this.
For that plan, yeah.
Right.
So there are some people that have taken advantage of that, but we do have some people that will say, "Oh, I can get the hotspot for free, so I'm going to ditch my Spectrum plan." Like,
so it's no cost to the student then. Okay.
Yeah.
She said that that Spectrum services pass by 2,050 homes, but that might include businesses as well.
Right.
So that's a fair number. It's not everybody, I would think.
Yeah. Do we have a number of how many homes there are in town?
I don't know. Derlin, do you have any sense of that?
Yeah.
No, probably Kyle could give us a
number on that. Yeah. Yeah. That could give us a percentage then.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
I say it's got to be quite a bit. I'm wondering that's because that's covering seasonal residences as well. I'm sure.
Yeah.
So 2,050 premises could be business, could be residents, seasonal, full time.
Yeah, and she said houses, but or homes, houses or homes, but yeah.
So I was just thinking ahead to whoever might present this to at a town meeting at some point. Can we declare victory in terms of everybody has it who wants it, and someone says, "Oh, no, I don't have it." So I'm trying to just check and see how do we know that. So, Lily, I was wondering from a real estate side, are there homes that you come across that nobody can't get Spectrum, can't get broadband? Do the real estate people know anything about that?
There are some areas that have had more significant challenges just because of the distance away from the road, and the cost. There are less and less homes that have that issue. I mean, I have a home that I sold off of the Indian Point Road last in the fall. Well, actually, it was in late summer. That there were 6 houses on, and the report back from Spectrum is that it would be astronomically expensive to be able to run from Indian Point Road all the way down to where the houses were. So, and I assisted the homeowners in reaching Spectrum construction to get an appointment, and it still came back at $10,000 or $12,000, and they just decided. Sorry.
A lot of that is from the Bar Harbor side too, that there's not a great cable plant for a lot of those outlying areas in Bar Harbor, that some of those roads would be easier serviced by, but unfortunately, the cable seems to stop at the Mount Desert Town line in a lot of those areas for some reason. I don't know why. But, that's something Bar Harbor could take up with Spectrum at some point. A lot of those roads do have at least the density that pretty much development did have, but I don't think Bar Harbor's got a plan to do anything like that currently. So,
but they have the line going down the Indian Point Road, but they just going off of that down, and there are multiple telephone poles down this road. So it really,
Yeah. Yeah, it can get expensive. I helped a bunch of people do an underground project, but Spectrum actually ran the wire for free, but getting the conduits installed underground and buried and dug and placed was, better part of $80,000. So it was like, but once that was in place, Spectrum could then come in and they did their part of it for free. But that's can get.
Why for free? Why would they do that for free?
They had enough. There were 3 residences that contributed to that, and once they had access to bring the cable, then it was they have the distance and they divided it by 3, and then it fell within their install criteria of the number of feet that they would do for free. So they came in and did the actual wiring once the conduit was installed for free. But the conduit was not free.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm looking back at my notes here, and she did say from Spectrum that they can do a direct fiber connection to any premises, that it takes about a year to get things done, that it's 6 to 8 months for pole permits and make ready, and then 2 months for Spectrum to attach, and that Spectrum doesn't own any poles in the town of Mount Desert.
No.
Right.
No. That's typical problem. I know the state's working on with this whole broadband initiative, and that's coming through to try to run some legislation through to streamline the attachment process, just because that's such an impediment for a lot of these projects moving forward. I know it was a huge impediment out on the Cranberries for that project to go. They ended up putting in their own poles. So. Right.
And was that faster doing it that way?
Oh yeah, they were able to do the poles, and Axiom, the company that did that project, was able to pull that off in a couple of months, where it was going to take like 9 to 10 months just to get permission to attach the other stuff.
Right.
Unfortunately, they now have extra poles everywhere.
Right.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Kathy, may I speak up?
France, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, hello, everybody. I'm Frank Baltzell. I just wanted to pipe in and say this fiber optics new to me, and so I've been trying to learn about it. And so I've just completed a two-day fiber optic course given by Fiber Optic Sales down in upstate New York.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting because fiber is much more reliable than copper. It is not. The vagaries of the weather do not affect it. Also, the line is much lighter than copper, and they can fit much more information through fiber. And so I think, this broadband committee and bringing in fiber to the town and where we can is definitely the future. And when they're saying 100 over 100, that is because of the fiber going to copper. So the copper slows it down.
Correct.
And so when you put fiber within the house as well, you're going to have much greater speeds. Right. And I just noticed that, I got a new dryer this year, and the dryer tells me on my phone when my clothes are dry. I mean, it's the next refrigerator I get is going to tell me when I need milk. So, and it's all internet based. Anyway.
Yeah, each one chews up a little bandwidth, so you tend to need more over time.
Yeah.
Well, and that, Frank, was years ago, the Economic Development Committee and the Broadband Committee, I think, grew out of that, had Tilson Technologies come and do an assessment of the town, and had lots of public meetings, asked people what they wanted, et cetera. And their recommendation was fiber to the premises would be the way to go to address everybody's concerns. But the cost of doing it was like $13 to $16 million. And so that was not, acted upon. But out of those conversations, the whole area of Pretty Marsh was, became known that they didn't have any kind of service. And so the focus was to address that major issue first.
Right.
See,
But
I think what that is about is the a lot of fiber optic is how many fiber optic cables do you have within the cable itself?
Right.
And you can have as little as 2, or you can have it in just multiples. You can have 128, you can have greater than that.
Right.
And I think, you know, the obviously the more fiber optic lines are in a cable, the more expensive. And so I'm going to be going down to visit family, and on the way down, I'm going to go to this place in upstate New York because they do produce the fiber optic lines. So I want to see how expensive they are, because I think that, you know, we're being told that it's umpteen millions. I'm not sure that's the case, because to me, wire is wire. So
The costs have gone down incredibly since that Tilson report was done too, quite a few years ago.
right, 2015.
Yeah, most of the stuff that Consolidated and Spectrum have now is fiber. Like we have a fiber line that comes into the school in Northeast Harbor that, you know, feeds from the high school. In the high school, we have fiber going out to all the schools, but we just use one pair of fibers, but there's 50 pair in that cable that's the size of a pencil that comes into the school. And you can use one fiber with 15 different colors of laser. So you can multiplex one fiber and have, you know, 15 different things happening on it all at the same time, which is kind of a bizarre concept, but
it's wavelength division multiplexing. The cost is not the fiber, it's lighting up the fiber. So the optronics becomes the big impediment. And then in the labor, the installation, the powering, what you do with it when it gets to the, you know, to feed it. So there's a lot of other things that go into the cost. So I think there's been tremendous progress here in the town of Mount Desert from what it was just a few years ago. So it's amazing how much progress has been made. So be interesting what the survey is saying.
It was driven by our original initiative. Plus, it's also just been driven by market need that, you know, people want it, and they're talking really loud, and some of the companies are responding better than others to meet that need. Yeah, I know a lot of times the Spectrum will bend the rules a little bit, and you know, they're supposed to be only 300 feet, but you know, the technician will get out there and he'll run 450 and just not tell anybody. So that's you know, they have some rules that they can bend on occasion too, depending on what the need is, and sometimes it depends on who you end up getting to doing the install, unfortunately. But it's definitely gotten a lot better for sure. I think we can all say that.
So we know that Consolidated in some parts of Maine is doing a lot more with fiber, moving away from DSL, copper wires, et cetera. Our next public meeting is with them on Tuesday, December 7 at 5:30. And we had a good turnout for the people of people for the Spectrum meeting. We had 23 participants as of 5:37 once we got started, and that's much better than we had before. So Derlin, I think the idea of reaching out to everybody with that public announcement really helped a lot.
Yeah, good. You know, Consolidated does have fiber. I mean, Lily knows that, you know, Consolidated brings fiber into the Knowles company, and they have a 10 by 10 fiber link there, and they do offer it, and for businesses and residences as well. Primarily business is their focus, but you can Consolidated is basically the main fiber backbone in the state. That's their real business. They don't like the phone business. They like the fiber backhaul business. They're the only provider for every cell phone company in the state. They basically provide the fiber backbone that connects all the cell phone towers together. So they do have a very robust fiber network that a lot of other ISPs work off of, like Axiom purchased a gigabit fiber connection from Consolidated out on Great Cranberry. It runs right in back of the Longfellow School, and that's how they distribute everything out to them they basically purchase the bandwidth from Consolidated and then redistribute it.
So if anybody wanted to, they could get fiber to their premise from Consolidated.
Correct. It's again, it's similar to Spectrum, and they focus on the business end primarily.
Mhm.
And it is a little bit of a lengthy process. I think
Wendell, along Sergeant Drive, where there was a number of significant properties along Sergeant Drive, didn't they band together to have Consolidated put in fiber in an area where kind of from the mid golf course beyond?
yeah, it runs, that's actually Spectrum. It runs down, I think, there's two houses that opted not to do the Spectrum, the very two before you get to the narrow part of the road there that didn't opt to connect to it. But I'm thinking, I haven't heard whether fiber has gone down with Consolidated there or not. I think those two houses, at least from what I know, they aren't interested in high-speed bandwidth currently, the current owners anyway that are there. One of them I have hooked up with a wireless radio link from another property, just because it was cheaper to do it that way than to bring in a whole separate cable line down there. Again, it was like $8,000 versus $1,000 to put a wireless link in for them. So, so there are other ways you can connect some people if they're wanting to be a little creative and not.
So the purpose of the meeting with Consolidated is to hear their plans.
Correct. See what they offer. Yeah.
But from a, if I'm hearing that the vast majority of the urgent needs for broadband in the town of Mount Desert are being met by Spectrum. But
Correct.
so
Either through the initiative we ran or through individuals and groups of individuals forming kind of an individual consortium and kind of defraying the cost.
and no supplier is perfect. So it would be our objective, I guess, would be to see would they be a worthy competitor for Spectrum, so that if Spectrum falls behind in some areas, Consolidated could be a competitor that would push them. Is that the idea of us?
Yeah, just to see what they offer. I haven't recommended them too often. I know they have a couple of new services where you can get what's called a bonded DSL line, where you can bring in multiple phone lines, which sometimes is helpful for a house that has more than one pair of copper. You can double or triple or quadruple the effective bandwidth on DSL. But
2 times a small number is still a small number.
Correct. Well, 7 is better than 3. But I mean, that sometimes fits the bill for what some people need in situations where they have the copper lines already and they're close enough to the central office where that's a solution. It's more cost effective sometimes than the other option.
John, for the people who responded to the survey, 78% had cable services, through Spectrum, and 14% had DSL through Consolidated. So by far, the greater number is with Spectrum.
Right.
Yeah.
And some of the problem is Consolidated hasn't been improving their plant very well, and they've basically so many people are moving away from landlines that that was their core industry for a long time. So they're kind of branched and gone more into the carrier fiber lines and more business connectivity, and haven't really focused a whole lot on residential stuff, just because they're kind of behind the 8 ball on their technology there.
The backbone is easy by comparison to the edges, and and businesses are easier to deal with than one big business, easier to deal with than a whole lot of residential ones.
Right.
So I can see why they defaulted to that. So it'd be good to have competition. I'm a fan of.
I think they did receive some rather large grants, Consolidated, both from the state and the FCC. So I know are in the throes of major expansions, particularly in northern Maine and western Maine. So they may be able to enlighten us on some of those plans, and if that technology is something that they're possibly thinking of bringing out to the island, as well as some of what they're doing inland. So it'd be good to know about what their plans are.
Yes, and in some communities, I mean, you can look up their website and they'll tell you that these 3 to 5 places in Maine, they're doing fiber to the premises in those
Right.
communities. I think Stonington Deer Isle is one of them, for instance.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that as a town, if we are to apply for any kind of competitive grant, we would not get any money for services that the incumbents are already going to do themselves anyway. So this is part of our due diligence to find out what are their plans going forward in this community, because we wouldn't want to duplicate that, or we wouldn't get funding to do it if they're already planning on doing it. So
Correct. Yeah.
It's
So that would be
part
good
of
too.
our community engagement and due diligence process.
Good. So when is that scheduled for? In a couple
It's
weeks?
Tuesday, December 7 at
Yeah.
5:30.
Okay.
We pushed it out a little bit because, you know, he had some time limitations, didn't want to get too close to Thanksgiving. So we thought, all right, let's do it early December. So
Yeah.
Is that all virtual or is there some in-person?
all virtual, all
Yeah.
virtual. Yes. Yeah. And one of the other potential sources of support or funding is through Hancock County, which is our next agenda item here.
Yeah, I didn't get a
especially-
chance to go to that meeting. Was it interesting? Yeah.
Well, and so Hancock County did their own RFP for consulting services to help assess where the county should go, because the county will get some federal funding, and they'll put a good portion of that towards broadband, and they need to figure out how they're going to do that. So they have contracted with Mission Broadband, which is based in Bangor. And so they had that public meeting the day before, actually. I think it was our own meeting with Spectrum. They had it on October 25th. And the gentleman who is representing Mission Broadband is John Doherty. So he's the consultant working with them. And he's going to help the county facilitate, across all of the towns. And the things that they're really going to focus on are surveys, public forums, and mapping efforts. That's what they believe they're going to do, and they're happy to work with individual towns that they realize will be at different stages of their own development. So we had, Derlin, you had a meeting with him, a conversation with him since then, right?
Yeah. I wanted just to get to know him a little bit, and also let him know that we did have an active broadband committee, and invited him to come to this meeting, but he was scheduled out, so we should get him to some meeting in the near future. But I also wanted to make sure that we were copying him on all of our minutes and anything that we're doing like that, so that they can be aware that we're out there and are looking at some options. So I want them to be aware that we are in the game somewhere. So it
sounds like the Hancock County stuff is more like high level, that they're kind of planning more kind of some of the background information to help towns move forward.
They have received 5.3 million from the government back in March.
Wow.
And I asked the question, how much has been spent, which probably wasn't very politic. He said, not much. But they're figuring out, I mean, each of the towns, in Hancock County, how are they going to, use those monies to best effect.
Right.
So, and they expect also, I think, in the future for perhaps another tranche of an equal amount.
Mm-hmm.
So I did send along an agenda for this meeting, and I will add him to our regular email contact list for notices and minutes, et cetera. Derlin, do you think we should also include Scott Adkins who's the administrator at Hancock?
doesn't hurt. No, I think it's a good idea.
We should.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just
All
so
right.
he's aware of what's going on.
Okay.
You know what I would also might copy on that is our county commissioner, Representative Paul Parody.
Oh, okay.
Excellent.
because the commissioners will be the ones that are actually going to be making the final decisions on the disbursement of this money, and Paul is our representative, so he should know that what's going on with us, I think. So I would copy him on everything
Okay.
as well.
Good. I'll do that then. Good. Maybe we'll let them know to expect it. There was, it was a pretty well-attended meeting for Hancock County. There were people there from Penobscot and Swans Island. Penobscot has been working on this for 4 years, and Swans Island for 3 years so far. And they're going forward with a fiber to the home plan through TDS. I've read recently that they voted down the idea of having a municipal network, but they voted in favor of having TDS do it and install and manage.
That's their current telephone provider. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been watching, and probably you have too, some of the efforts on these municipal programs. The cable companies and everything are spending lots of money to try to beat them. I think it was at Orono, they got in there, and I'm not sure if it got voted down, but I almost think that the Orono Council voted down a municipal network. They got a lot of pressure. I don't know if it was off spectrum, but it was a group. I don't know if it was a Trump type group or whatever that really was starting to spend a lot of effort trying to beat these municipal fiber programs as socialistic and bad for business and whatever. So any of those groups that are looking towards a municipal network are probably going to run into some of these groups that will try to do their best to fight and get them voted down. So that's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, it's interesting too, and I think it's putting pressure on a lot of the providers to step up their act and do a better job too. Yeah. So I think it kind of is kind of a dual-edged sword there. I think you don't get movement A unless you have pressure in the B area. Kind of like
the market forces at work. It's just that the market is like sometimes against the municipalities. So
Yeah, I have a question. The schools are connected with fiber optic. Are the police departments?
I know, Derlin, are they still moving forward with that project to connect the Bar Harbor?
Yes, we are. In fact, we're just running, we've got a report coming from Brian. Actually, we've got a report, and we're doing an addendum to it to connect the Soamesville Fire Station as well.
Right.
So
I know I saw fiber being run from the town, and it kind of goes to the high school, and it's near. So they were running a bunch of stuff in anticipation. I'm not sure if that's related to that project.
I believe Bar Harbor's already connected in. We need to do it as well. I was looking, we get some ARPA money too, not a great deal, but we get 112 this year and 112 next year. And I was looking into what is the idea of being able to use some of that ARPA money to run that project.
Right.
But what it's appearing, I don't have it 100% yet, but what it's appearing is that would not count for ARPA purposes as broadband.
Right.
Unless it had the possibility of running, residents and things through it. So we've got to take a look at that a little bit too.
Right.
But I think, because I was hoping to be able to use some of that ARPA money to fund that project, but I'm not 100% sure I'm going to be able to at this point.
Right.
So we'll see. I'm getting some clarifications.
Yeah, good.
So just to clarify, Derlin, you said that the contract to connect the police departments are going to add an addendum to connect the Soamesville Fire Station as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So I think that project is most public buildings in the town, right? It's also the garage and some of the sewer plants and
not at this point.
Not at this
Not
point,
at this
no.
point,
No.
just public safety at this point.
Just
But
public safety.
that's an
okay.
idea, is eventually perhaps to connect the others, but we didn't
Right.
want to get this business because we desperately need the public safety connection.
Right,
And by putting in the other buildings at this stage would drive the price way up.
right,
So we don't want to run that into a political gamut at this time. So we want
Right.
to do the public safety, and then we'll worry about the other buildings.
right, down the road.
I
Once
think
you've
we
got
can
that
make a
main,
good
once you've
can
got
make a
that main
good
trunk
economic
line too,
case.
you can build off of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and we
I
can
believe,
make a good
Wendell, that Bar
economic
Harbor is planning on connecting all of their public buildings.
Yeah, I think
That's
that
what
was,
their town had voted on, but not here.
case. Yes, 'cause
Um,
A
so-
question, has Consolidated or Spectrum offered to put their hat in the ring to connect all our safety institutions and buildings?
well, I think Derlin pays Spectrum right now for the connection, but it's quite expensive, I think. So hoping to save some money, right? Yeah.
We're hoping to be able to do those connections to the other buildings and be able to drop that, which is quite expensive. It would be like, I think, at a 5-year payback, we would be even if we were able to do that. So we're still running some numbers on that, but that's the overall goal. But that's going to be a few years down the line
Yeah.
before we get all of those done.
Frank, I think that this came about because the town of Bar Harbor had been getting services from, I believe, Spectrum, but now we're going to be charged like $40,000 a year. And so that's why they wanted to look at a more robust municipal route on their own and then
Right.
to connect with us. So,
Right, with the merger of the police departments too, it's kind of
yes, yep.
been the driving force, I think, yeah.
So, we have received a proposal from Brian Lippold of Casco Bay. And in his response to us, he had said, just so you know, Hancock County is doing something. So you may want to check with them before you do anything with me, because it could sort of dovetail or replicate. Now that we know more about what the county is doing, do we have any thoughts on what we should or should not do with Brian Lippold? Because I think what he was going to do was going to be well beyond what Hancock County is now offering to do
Right.
in
So
this
you're
first iteration.
So you're gonna be working with the Vetro data and kind of developing more detailed fiber plans, I think. That was what his proposal was, right? To do a build out plan, yeah.
It was more of a high level build out plan. It wasn't going pole to pole and figuring out all of that, but it was figuring out, yes, he would be using the Vetro platform, figure out where things are, but it was more of a high level review. And I think it was about $6,000, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think, didn't he do some of the work for Swans Island? I think he did, and I remember seeing his plans for that, and it was pretty detailed too, so, yeah.
Well, and we have, our town knows what he has done for this town. So I think that there's confidence in his work anyway.
Right. So I guess the question is, we need to think about next steps. What direction we want to go and whether we're going to be served well enough from the current providers, or if we still want to go with the whole new fiber plan. I guess we just have to have a discussion about that, I guess, right?
And just so you know, if anyone is interested in seeing what he has done for the police department collaboration there, those documents, there is a dark fiber map book and the project report from March of this year. Those are in our shared Dropbox folder. So
yeah, they're quite detailed. So
yes.
So that's good.
So in terms of next steps, I agree. I'm not clear what the goal is anymore, in the sense that a few years ago, the goal was clear. We had a significant fraction of the town of Massachusetts which had no broadband. It was creating an economic drag and perhaps a real estate drag, major problems, schools, whatever. We've largely filled that gap, I think. What I'm hearing here, we have compared to 0 to 3 megabits, we're now discussing, well, you can get a gigabit if you want to for under $100. That's fantastic. 100 megabits is fantastic for people. So there can be some gaps here or there in coverage. And we can go try to fill those in, but that would seem to take care of that initial push for this committee. But there can be other goals for the committee, as we point out, the technology moves and demands move, and there can be a need for a group that provides be a repository for expertise and what's happening in the industry and where that's going. And it's not something that's perhaps readily apparent. And that might lead to a different set of goals for this committee. So I'm just trying to get a sense of, it might be a third goal, I don't know, but one is achieve broadband for everybody once at a reasonable price. I think we're almost there, a few gaps to fill, or be an ongoing group of repository of this kind of information so we can kind of help the town government skate to where the puck will be in anticipation of future demands. To me, it's different.
Right. So I guess we should have come up with, if we can come up with a rough idea of what it would cost to do fiber to the premises, then we could see whether it makes sense to even move in that direction or not. I don't know if it was, the last plan was like 13 million. So it would probably be maybe half or a third of that now, probably just because of the reduced cost of everything. But
So-
I think there are a lot of unknowns. We don't know how
Right.
that county is going to proceed.
right,
And we don't know, actually, I guess they've passed one part of another $1 trillion.
right,
And, there's going to be maybe another tranche after that.
correct.
And,
Yeah.
yeah. And all I've heard is that there isn't going to be any inflation. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and it would be so nice if Hancock County could be more of a collaborative effort, and at least particularly the island towns, if we could. I mean, there'd be a huge economy of scale of doing a joint effort, obviously, but
Wendell, do you think there's any hope to be able to have the towns be able to even meet to talk
Boy.
about one umbrella program, or has
Well,
everything gone down such a path that individual towns really are the better option on the short term is just go on it on our own?
well, I don't know if it's anything like the school district with getting the school committees to work together. It's a challenge, I know.
But there are,
Well, you-
but there are towns that are interested in doing things on their own and or in conjunction with us. And
Yeah.
I think that as any of us, as individual towns, would be in a much better position to get funding if
Right.
there was a regional approach.
Oh,
So
completely.
It's
Correct,
in
yeah.
all of
I
our
know-
interests
I
to
know.
try and make it work together.
Right,
I think the
from my
other,
work on the, I was going to just say, I know from my work on the League of Towns, you've got several of them. Unfortunately, the whole western side of Mount Desert Island is saying, not so much. We like what we got and we don't need any more. But
Yeah.
other parts, I mean, Bar Harbor is not in that boat necessarily. So we might be able to move up, and then Trenton, Lemoyne, some of those may have some interest.
Right.
Unfortunately, an island-wide thing I don't think is going to go, because they just say, no thanks, we don't need to spend any more than what
Right.
we've already spent. So
Right.
they seem to be very happy with what they've got.
yeah. I mean, if the climate changes and like Frank was saying, all this money from Hannah, well, from funny money, I like to call it, comes available, then then some of that temperament might change. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
if
think-
it's free, they will.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the other thing, and again, this may have been discussed at another meeting that I missed or something, but I think the other thing is that, we're starting to build an itemized work plan of how to move forward with this. I do think that we also need to be mindful of kind of a parallel course of, okay, here's what we need and how much it's going to cost. I think the parallel course is, how long is this going to take to build out?
Right.
Because one can be working on these things and get all excited about it, and from what I hear in the limited amount of time that I pay attention to things outside of MDI, that there's a lot of other towns that are a lot further along than we are, and
Mhm.
where are we going to fit in the pipeline? And
Right.
we may get everybody really excited and get to a town vote, and everyone's like, great, when's it going to happen? And then we're going to say, probably 2 to 3 years from now,
Oh,
and
easily it could
that's
be.
going to, that's going to be one of the big hurdles that people are, getting people on board to be able to support this project. May need to be honestly projecting, when is this going, when are you actually going to see the results of this?
Right.
And I think that, we, in the early last round, we lost momentum because people were like, well, this is going to be 2 years out, and the technology is going to be changing in 2 years. So why should we spend $5 or $10 million on this when the technology is going to be changed by the time we actually go down this road? And I
And
don't mean to be a wet blanket, but I just think some of these points are really important to keep an eye on when we have, the potential of millions of dollars out there ready to spend on this. Well, it's one thing to spend it. And I see this with park projects all the time. We've got millions of dollars ready to do deferred maintenance in the park, and your construction lineup is 2 years out,
Right.
So
Right.
I just think that we need to be realistic about what we're doing, how much time we're spending on it, where we're going with this, and how we can be transparent about the reality of the timeline with the people that are going to vote for this in the big picture.
Right.
So
I would agree completely with you. And I think that there are several points that we made in our survey. The 4 goals for this was future-proof infrastructure, which meant fiber optic, because you're right, the technology on the ends might change, but the fiber optic is not going to for any of our lifetime. So that was the first point. Universal accessibility, or fiber to the home, fiber to the premises, et cetera, so that everybody who wants it can use it. Digital inclusion, to bring everybody along. And that's the education component that I think we have not done much work on, and that will help bring people around to say, how would you use it if you had it? Make it personal to everybody. And then affordability, make it. And I think you're right. You can't have immediate expectations that you're going to get it tomorrow. But if we have a well thought out plan to say, this is going to take a while, we're not going to throw everything in it right now, because again, the economy of scale, bringing other towns on, changes into, it might become less expensive if we wait a little bit longer, as it has already. So I think that if we set appropriate expectations, it will help us bring people along to a final vote.
Right. Those are great points.
So what I would request is that we be clear on what the problem is we're trying to solve. I'm just coming from the standpoint of, I don't want to have committees that live on because they just what committees do. I want to make sure there's a clear goal for the committee, and I'm a fan of what you just laid out there, but it doesn't have to be us building it. To me, it's not a core competency of the town of Mount Desert to be a telecom provider or internet provider. Other companies do that. And so the question is, we're trying to solve it. That's the goal, and we have different ways of getting there. One is Spectrum does it, another is that Consolidated does it, another is that we do it ourselves. The construction would seem to certainly be relevant for the third approach, but maybe we ought to be making sure we understand what's the plans for the first 2 will they be doing it? And then we don't have to. So I'm just asking for clarity in the goals because again, I apologize. I'm not been attending all the meetings. Maybe this has been well discussed already. I just like to see it in front of us. The reason why we exist is the following. I like the 4 steps you laid out there, and then we can focus on how we're doing on those 4 objectives for the committee. So thank you for that, Kathy.
I would agree with that, John. We don't have to do it as a town, but I think we have to set what our goals are. And are we sticking with fiber to the premises of fiber optics so that it meets those other criteria? And how we get there, that's what we have to decide through a process to say, maybe we go out to bid, maybe we say, this is what we want to do. Maybe we say, we're going to do this section this year. We'll do another section next year, however it works. But I do wonder if working with Casco Bay Advisors and going through his proposal makes sense to help us organize this, because some of this is, he had a 7-week proposal here, a kickoff meeting, location validation, field audit and gap mapping, data extract and cost estimation, franchise agreement validation. So let's see what our agreements are with the incumbents and are we or they living up to those agreements? And then recommendations and reports.
He's doing a lot of this up front, isn't he, for the county? Is that correct?
He is not. He was one of the people, businesses being considered as a consultant, but he is not the one that was chosen to do it. But when he presented this proposal to us, he said, you should know the county has put out an RFP for a consultant. And so whatever they're going to do might help what you're going to do. But now that we've had that meeting with the consultants from Hancock County, we realize that what they're going to be doing is county-wide surveys, and I think they would work with different towns, public forums, and a mapping effort. And so we've already done a survey. We've gotten some information on mapping. We are also in the Vetro. We're going for another year with them as a part of their cohort 3. And so I'm thinking maybe we're ahead of where the county is, and we're not going to benefit from what they're doing right now, unless they have something else to offer, because we are where we are.
Right. Do we have a rough idea on Casco Bay Advisors, what he's estimating his charge would be for doing all of this?
$9,800.
Yeah. So that's not
And
terrible. That's not a terrible amount of money, and it might provide us some
a lot of detail.
Yeah, I think we have this moment with Vetro. We have this moment of a snapshot from our survey. In my mind, we should finish the thought to gather the information so we can either help make an informed decision or present this information to the town. And then it's going to be much easier to make a decision. Okay, is Spectrum actually going to live up to this? Personally, I don't see how I'm paying $75 a month now, how they're going to actually drop fiber to my home in a reasonable amount of time for only $25 a month more. I kind of believe it when I see it. But we should, I think we should just have all the information. We've gone far enough. I think it probably makes sense to have that survey, have that consultant done. Then we will also get the Hancock County perspective, and we'll get a really strong picture there.
Right.
And to John's point, maybe this turns into, we do all this diligence and it turns into, okay, Spectrum is the best solution. Our role might shift to being maybe an advocate for residents for how do they navigate Spectrum, because it's very difficult for a lot of residents right now to get Spectrum to deploy out to their home. And so if we're saying, look, Spectrum is the solution, we're gonna have to push them to get fiber across the town if that's really what we want to do. And so maybe that's something kind of how we can help in that regard. But I do think that we should at least gather up as much information as we can while we're on the train.
Great. I agree. By the way, I'm not against any of this stuff. I just want to make sure we're clear that we're not just road to Abilene is a metaphor in Texas about people taking off on a trip and not knowing why they went there, but they got there fast. But then why we're here? So I just want to make sure that we are clear on the goals. I love the technology, and I come from a company that did a lousy job of skating to where the puck had been and not to where it would be. So I understand the value of what you're trying to do. I just want to make sure we're clear here on the goals and keep that in front of us so we don't, it would be good, at least for me, it'll become a good guiding principle. I know what the courses I'm on. So thank you for that. I agree, Pete.
Good.
Do you think maybe this is one of the things we should do next meeting is to work on some clearly defined goals?
Sure. Yep. And Brian said his work would take about a month and a half, something like that.
He had a 7-week plan that started off in week 1 with a kickoff meeting and ended in week 7 with a presentation.
Right.
Now, I also have to say that his bid here, his proposal to us, which is in our shared folder there, if you want to look at it directly yourselves, should the towns of Bar Harbor, Southwest, and Tremont join in this effort, the combined price for all 4 towns would be $2,200, with the cost allocation per town determined by Mount Desert. So I'm not sure if they all, that's a good question,
right,
for those folks.
Right.
Yeah, they did. Southwest and Tremont rejected it.
Of course.
Tremont rejected it? Okay. I thought they were on board.
Now, they're not at the moment. I can double
All
check,
right.
but
Trenton is interested. Trenton reached out to
Trenton
us
is.
and said that they were interested. So now his price acceptance, this offer was good for a certain period of time.
Correct. Yeah.
And I'm trying to look at where, let me look at his cover letter here. Yeah, so I'll just read you this paragraph. The final product of this initiative will result in a comprehensive report designed to achieve the goal for everyone in the town to have access to reliable, affordable, high-speed, and future-ready internet service. The report will include a recommended strategies and related costs for filling gaps in high-speed internet availability, recommended sources of funding to implement the recommended strategies, and all the data and information that is collected and developed in support of those findings.
Yeah.
Is
that something we have money for, Derwin, you think? Or?
Well, yeah, we would. I think I carried over a little money from last year. I think we could probably squeeze it out. I'll do a double check, but I think so.
Right.
If the select board wanted to pay for it, obviously.
Right, yeah.
You would have to go to them for their approval.
Right.
But I think, I'll do a double check, but I'm reasonably sure that we've got enough money in there now to do that. That would just about, between that and my extension over to the Soamesville Fire Station, I think that would pretty much clean up the consultant money for this year, even with the carryover. So, but I think we could do it.
And so the way he set this up was a not to exceed fee of $9,800. And that price was valid for 30 days. And he provided this to us August 31. So we have exceeded those 30 days.
Right. Check with him first then.
Yeah. Do you want me to do that, or do you want to do that, Derlin?
Yeah, could you send me a copy of that so I don't have to go dig it out into your shared files?
Yes.
I'm not good at that. If you just send a copy to me, I'll send it over. I'll send it over to Brian tomorrow and ask him if that price still holds. Sure, happy to do it. Meanwhile, I'm going to go in and check what we've got into that the budget. Hold on a second while we're talking, and we go look at that.
The other I think once we get that underway, I think that we need to start paying more attention to the digital literacy, digital inclusion part of this, education to bring people along. Because ultimately, we're going to want to bring this to we're going to need to bring this to a town vote to spend any money on it. And that we want to bring people along. And as one of our guests at one of these speakers, the Maine Center for Digital Equity, Susan Corbett, said, if you want people to vote a town, you've got to do the education to bring them along. So I think that we need to come up with a campaign on how we're going to do that.
Yeah.
All right.
Sounds good.
So any other business that we should deal with today?
I think we've covered a fair number of pieces. Yeah.
Frank, I'm glad you could join us today. This was your first meeting, I think, with us, right?
No, second, I think. I've just missed one meeting. So,
Okay.
so far. Yeah.
All right.
So yeah, I'm still learning. This is great. And yeah, I don't know. Hey, why don't we get rid of all the telephone poles?
That'd be a great idea.
Frank, the most important,
wires. Gee, that's a great idea.
Frank, the most important thing that you can put in your back pocket to help with this process is something that was super hard for me to learn, which is patience. Because all of these projects, and I learned it from the first project I worked on in Ellsworth, nothing goes as quickly as you think or hope it will.
No.
But the thing that makes all the difference is keeping our nose to the grind and being persistent, because our focus and resiliency in understanding this will be a marathon, not a sprint, wins out. So
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Our next meeting is Thursday. It's always the second Thursday of each month. So the next one would be December 9 at 4 o'clock. That is 2 days after our public meeting with Consolidated.
Oh, that'll be good to be able to review
Hope
that.
you can all make both of those meetings. So, and I'll send out reminders and flyers, and I'll put an announcement in the newspaper, and we'll get it on the town website. And I think if we can follow again that pattern, Derlin, of last time of sending out an announcement of the meeting, and maybe even to all those people who did do the survey, just FYI, we have another public meeting coming up. I think the more we have present, the better.
Yeah, sounds good. And I'd just like to thank you, Kathy, for all your hard work on this. You've done a great job.
Yeah, great job, Kathy.
Thank
All
you.
right. Have a good night, all.
Plug it away. All right.
you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.